What is it like to work in a call center? That is a little bit of broad topic to try to discuss because there's many different ones. There's obviously inbound sales, outbound sales. Outbound is where you're calling people, asking if they want to buy something. Inbound is where they're calling up, asking for services. You have customer service lines where they simply make adjustments to the accounts and things, as well as actual technical support where you call up, say, hey, this is not working, whether it be a computer, network, cell phone, list goes on. So to try to make some generalities and lump them together is a little bit of a challenge. It will vary by company, but I will put forth some things that I have noticed in my many years experience with many different companies of all levels. And if you've never worked in a call center, at least give you an idea if it's something you're interested in going into, at least what to expect. And if you're calling in to somebody in a call center, give you at least understanding what's going on the other side. Hopefully make the whole thing go faster and easier. So, first off, it varies by company, and I have seen some smaller companies where, well, I've seen larger companies as well, but a lot of times you have smaller companies where there's your phone, do what you need to do for what the job, and that's about all the support they give you. I've seen some larger companies that do basically the same thing. There's one company I worked for that wanted a very high turnover rate. Don't ask me why, it made no sense, but on their end of the books, they had some convincing. They wanted it like that. It was very strange. I've seen places that made no effort to make it a happy, positive environment, and it was just very negative, very toxic. One place I worked, they could not pay me enough to go back there. I've mentioned to people, oh, they could pay you enough, six figures or whatever it is. When I explain what it's like to work there in the environment, they would understand that, yeah, maybe for a couple weeks, a few months, but eventually you reach the end of your shift at the end of a weekend, days off coming up, and the thought that you're going to have to come back in 48, 72 hours, whatever it is, and that the thought of that almost moves you to tears. That's how bad some of those environments can be. Most are not like that I've worked in. Most of the time, they do try to make it a happy, positive environment as best they can. In fact, I saw a smaller company, as far as budget and everything, put a lot more effort into that than larger companies that had the budget to try. They had several break rooms. One of the break rooms actually had TV with cable channels and stuff you could watch, game consoles and stuff you could go relax and play video games, things like that. It was very surprisingly amount of effort that company put into making it a happy, fun environment. And then I've been other places that were much larger, could do a lot more if they wanted, and they kind of did that bare minimum. They talked about how they want a happy, positive environment, but there wasn't a lot of follow through on that. It's not that they did nothing, but there wasn't a lot. So you do have those variations in company. Most people, when they hear you work in a call center or something like that, oh, it must be so terrible. You have all those negative calls, people complaining, this and that. Yeah, that does happen, especially if you're like in a customer service or a department where you're dealing with those kind of complaints and issues. Most of the time, that is not the case. Most calls, people are calling up either wanting to make changes to their services, interested in adding things, changing things out, or something's not working right, they just want it corrected. Okay, great, now they're done. That's how most calls go. And if you're able to resolve those issues quickly and easily, the people are happy and they're done. When you do get a call that is upset, believe it or not, those are actually easier calls. Yeah, it sounds totally bizarre, but in a call you have stats and things you have to do. The company might have things that they want you to do in each call. For example, thank them by name, confirm them on the account, verify that you have the right account, update information, things like that. And you're going down the list of things that they want done in that call, make a recommendation of a possible improvement to their services if they wanted to add this or change that. All these different little stats. And there was one place I worked actually had 13 different things I was supposed to do over the course of that call. It was rather ridiculous trying to go through all of them. bullet points trying to go down while I'm trying to navigate this customer through the issue, and it was just data overload. And what that was is all these other departments and supervisors saying, "Oh, hey, let's do this. Oh, hey, let's do that," and telling the people on the phones to just add all this stuff, add all this stuff, add this stuff. And I finally I started pointing out, and I wrote down all this stuff to my supervisor, emailed it to him. This is what you want me to do in a call. Don't complain to me if I missed a point on something like that, because this is ridiculous. They kind of eased off on a few things, and I was probably good enough to be able to respectfully talk back and get away with it. Mind you, some of my stats put me in the top 15% enterprise-wide, which is puts you in a very small group. So just to give you an idea is how good I was. But that you have all these stats going on. When somebody calls up that's upset and just furious, regardless as to why, those little bullet points go out the window. All of a sudden, if somebody audits that call, they're not going to be upset that you didn't offer this change in their services, or say that they could save money by doing this or that. They're going to say, "Hey, they ranted and vented at you, and you didn't take anything. You didn't get upset. You handled that well. Great job." Those calls are easier because you don't have to go through all these little loops and jump through all these little hoops for them. And most of the time, when they call up, they're upset at the situation. Their fault, their cause, or nothing. They just want it fixed. And a lot of times it is something they caused, either because they didn't understand how the services worked, or because they simply didn't pay a bill. You get it fixed, they're back up, they're happy. I have dealt with sometimes where one person was threatening to throw his product he purchased against the wall and go out and buy anything else from anyone else because he was so frustrated with it. Every time he'd call in, people would just give him a piece of the solution and get him off their phone as quickly as they could. And I took the time to explain how all these services and things work together, how it all worked, and it was like a light went off. All of a sudden, he understood how it worked. So he's all excited. He's happy. "Oh, wow, that's great. Oh, I'm so glad I bought this product from you, this and that, and all this different stuff." It's just making sure they understand. And that usually diffuses those problems and frustrations. But just go down, the list, these things you're supposed to do in these calls, and you do have to have the mentality of water off a duck's back. And understand they're not mad at you personally, they're upset at the situation. Again, their fault, nobody's fault, things happen. And I've been on both sides of that. There was one, well, don't want to chase too many rabbits in this and go into too many stories, because I'm trying to keep this video under 20 minutes. It would be easy to go on with some of these things. So those bad calls really aren't so bad, and they're not very common. By and large, you're dealing with people who just want to have a problem, want it fixed, and they're done. Some companies actually they work in a call center where you go down there and you work in this large room. Sometimes it's a huge room, warehouse kind of thing, with multiple call centers across the country and hundreds of people on the phones at any given time. And others are just like the back room of a business kind of thing with 10 or 20 people on your phones doing stuff. Some places you can actually work from home. In fact, a lot of companies are going that way because they don't have to pay to have all these people there, have their own desk and everything set up. You log in, remote in from home, and you're working. So it is a cost savings to a company, which is nice. There are some limitations. You can run into situations of dogs barking, different other problems. I never liked working from home. The one company I worked for really wanted me to, but I tried to explain to them, I have a dog that would not understand why I can't play ball right now. He would not understand. Close the door, he'd bark and scratch. It's not going to work. In the actual work, you are usually divided into teams. This is each with its own team lead, basically a supervisor, and the whole point is to make a group where you have 50 or even hundreds of people into more manageable sizes. So each team might be 6 to 12 people, depending on the company and workloads, and that lead supervisor would do all the call auditing, checking of stats, things like that. and so you're more manageable. And this way you're also in a subgroup where you're able to get to know each other, help each other, talk back and forth, find out how to resolve issues. If you're struggling with something, how do I do this? How do I handle that situation better? You're able to, it's just a more manageable area. And then, of course, side note for the company is they're able to create competition between this group and that group. This team and that team, in competition, who can do better in these stats. And the stats are a kind of a whole different beast. It varies by company as to what stat is important. If it's sales, usually it's number of sales per call or total volume of sales accomplished in a given time frame. This person's got 10 deals, but each one was $1,000. This person got 1,000 deals done in the same amount of time frame, but each one's only $10. You get that kind of thing going on back and forth. And that sales in customer support and technical support, usually the focus is more on handle time. Most companies have some kind of goal as to what they want, and usually it's a 5-point system, 3 being in the middle, and above that is better, below that is worse. We want the average call to be 8 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever time frame they want. One place I worked, they wanted their calls around 11 minutes. Another place wanted it around 8 minutes, and that's average. And I have had times where I spent 40 minutes on one call, and I'd get, most of my calls were probably around 10 minutes at that one place, but they wanted it, their goal was they wanted 11 minutes. Most of mine were probably around 10 on average. But I would have calls that would be, 40 minutes long. And then I would have other calls that were around 3 minutes. So the average is what they look at. And the average of first call resolution, did you resolve your issue and the person didn't have to call back in the next week? Specifically, call back if they call back with the same problem or something else. It could be a different stat, but that first call resolution. Then you'd have, if you're sending out technicians or people to the location to help resolve issues, you have what's called avoidable truck rolls, and that is, did you send out a technician to resolve an issue when you didn't need to? Was it something that could have been avoided? Then you'd have your handle time. There's usually some kind of upselling, even if it's technical. There's usually some kind of upselling. I always approach that with, hey, for your information, you can also, if you wanted to add this or change that, you could do it for only this much more. I have this promotion available. I'm not interested in that. I'm just not aware of your options, and move on. I put forth the offer. Management was happy. I don't do sales. I really am not a good salesperson. If you want sales, if you're depending on me to move product to keep your company going, file for bankruptcy right now. I'm just telling you, I can't sell. But I would do that, and those basic offers, and if people are interested, they'd jump on. If not, they'd move on to something else. Often, just that basic reference later in the call is that, now you said something about that. Well, what exactly was that? Just kind of plant a bug in the ear and revisit it later. Not always, but sometimes they did. So understand, if you're calling in and they make some of this stuff, it's not them just trying to sell you something, this and that. They're under pressure. If they don't make that offer, they get yelled at. So humor them, say not interested, and move on. It's really not that hard. I've had people go, I'm not interested, don't sell me anything. They go on and on. If they just let me make the offer and they say not interested and move on, we'd be done with the call by now. So people are funny. So you have all these different stats, and each company is going to be different on what they want or how they want them. Usually when you first start, they're more forgiving. And then, of course, a supervisor does what's called coaching sessions, where they sit down and look at you. Hey, you have improved this stat by this percentage. Good job. You still need to work on this one over here. What can I do to try to help you do better? And in a good company, in a good environment, that coaching session will be with the focus of, how can I make you a better employee? How can we better resolve these issues? How can we handle this better? Places where I've worked that were not so good, the coaching sessions were, you stupid idiot, why aren't you doing better? And I want to point out that stupid and idiot are basically the same thing. So you're really just doubling up your negative, and it's not really making a positive work environment that you say you want, while encouraging me to do better. It's the one place, actually, it was a joke. I'd like to give him a coaching, and of course, upper management would hear some of these comments, and we want coaching to be a positive environment. We want the people to experience something positive, see how they can grow and do better. We don't want it to be a negative comments back and forth for that. And I roll my eyes where they couldn't see me, and I'd say, "Yeah, right. You created this environment." So you have that going on. The goal, in theory, is to find out how you can do better. But as with most jobs, if you do not do well enough, it can lead to something where you are getting released from your position, simply because they need you to meet certain stats. If they're getting 300 calls a day, and you, as X number of technicians or people on the phone, are not able to resolve the issues quickly enough, it causes other issues affecting their costs, which ultimately affects their customers' positive experience. So you try to watch that, and I always push higher end on that handle time. But when your other stats are, like I said, in the top 15% enterprise-wide, and your worst stat meets their expectations and they have nothing to really complain about, they will tolerate that higher stat, because if your first call resolution, avoidable truck rolls, etc., everything else is basically the envy of anyone else there, you're able to get away with a lot more. If everything else is scraped along on the bottom and you don't have as much leeway, I would advise not to worry and obsess about the stats, because if you're on a call worried about getting off that call as quickly as you can, the call's quality will drop. And if you're calling into a call center to make a better call, get the issue resolved quicker and easier, don't do lengthy explanations as to what happened last week leading up to this, where you noticed your cell phone or whatever it was doing this. Just tell them what it's doing, and they'll tell you how to resolve it. If they put forth any pitches, offers, or anything else, just say not interested, move on. You can make those calls literally 3 minutes long. I mean, really, if somebody, and maybe 5, but I have had 3-minute or less calls depending on the situation, and just get the issue resolved and done. That is, again, some situations there, a lot of variables. But really, the worst part, the hardest part in working in a call center is the relentless psychological hammering of the calls. If you're working like a retail store or a restaurant or something like that, and it's a high-stress environment situation, it's not like that all day long. You have a rush time. People run home, or get out of work, hit the store, grab whatever, and leave. So you have this crunch time, like an hour and a half, that's bad. You can, if it's a bad over a weekend, a Saturday, Sunday, where it's just bad all day, you're able to go into the back room to get something, take a deep breath, and then grab something and go back out. You're not in it constantly. In the call centers, you log into a system, and from the second you log in to the second you log out, you're there getting calls. Psychologically, even if it's not like a bad call, people upset, if it's technical, you're trying to resolve issues, you're trying to find what's going on, you're trying to go down these bullet points to resolve issues and problems, trying to get in all the stuff that management wants in the call. It's very psychologically draining. And I have had 10-hour and even 12-hour shifts of that. And when you're dealing with that day after day, some shifts I've been able to avoid them, but I've seen shifts where it was 4 10-hour days right together. And then they'd come in with mandatory overtime, 2 hours added on to that. And it was mentally, it's like by the end of the shift, you are wanting just to die. Your mind is gone. So that is the hardest part, is that mental, relentless hammering that you're getting. Even if it's not like technical, where you're trying to troubleshoot a network connection or something else going on with a complex system, you're still trying to look this over, find out what's wrong with the profile, the account, resolve that, unlock these systems, back up for them to allow it to work, and it is very mentally draining. But that is, I would say, is the hardest part. If that's something you can manage, you can do very well and get some good jobs in that. If it's not something you can manage or think you would do well in, it's something to understand at least going in, so at least have an idea of what's happening and what to expect. But a lot of generalizations and glossing over a few things, but basically that's what it's like to work in a call center. I almost forgot one key thing. Shift bids. The way scheduling works, if it's a 24-hour or if it's simply between regular business hours, almost always you have some kind of weekend shift as well. But vast majority of the time, call centers have some kind of floating shifts around, and you do what's called a shift bid. Partially based on seniority, partially based on stat performance. Sometimes it's just specific stats that will be of key. Sometimes it's an average of overall on your stats. It depends on how that policy is, and again, percentage therein. But you might have a pool of shifts. One might be 4 10-hour days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. One might be Saturday, Sunday. Different other times. There's flex and swing shifts, all sorts of things. So depending on your seniority and your shift performance for your stats, you will be able to go into a pool, a listing of who gets to pick the shifts. So whoever is the top gets their pick, then the next, and going down the list. And it might be carried out in many different ways. But once the shifts are sent out, you will then find out what your shift is. Now that does not mean if you're new you're going to be stuck working at 3:30 a.m. or something like that. Believe it or not, a lot of gamers and other groups that like those late night, swing shifts as you might call them, will get in there, and some of them have such high seniority and stats and everything built up that nobody's going to get that position. You're waiting for somebody to either retire or die in order to get some of them. There was one call center I went to, they told me flat out, if you're looking for something in this time frame, it will not happen. You're going to have to wait for one of them to retire or something to get those openings. So it's kind of an interesting little note. The downside is you're never really sure what your shift will be until you get it, and then it's that way set until the next shift bid. I have had situations where I was told of a shift bid coming up. A week later, the shifts were available. A week after that, I submitted my request. A week after that, I found out what my shift would be. And then it kicked in a week after that. So, grand total, 3 weeks from the time I found out about the shift bid till the time it was implemented. It makes it difficult to plan out far in advance, college classes, schedules, things like that, because you don't know what you're going to have. And some call centers and places that I've worked have not been very helpful in that area. So it's another thing to keep in mind. As I said, it has its pros and cons. But until next time, game on.